Welcome. Please note that you can type questions for us during the Q&A using the chat box. In today's session, we will only be taking questions on matters covered in the SR 2019. For other topics, please ask them offline by sending us an email. I will now hand over to Pak Agus Purnomo to say a few words about our sustainability efforts in 2019.
Entitled Staying.
Hi, Pak. You're online now.
Welcome to the presentation on the GAR SR 2019. Entitled Staying the Course, the report shows how GAR is continuing with its implementation of responsible palm oil. Published 5 years after the launch of the GAR social and environmental policy, as well as in the midst of a global pandemic, the title captures fully our intention to remain committed to sustainability. When we planned this edition, we were essentially looking to emphasize our steadfast commitment to sustainable and responsible production. The report highlights our ongoing work and investment in areas we have already been working on for the past few years. While this steady implementation may not be the stuff of attention-grabbing headlines, it is nevertheless the critical momentum that keeps us on track towards our sustainability goals. In this report, you will find updates on our progress towards achieving full traceability to the plantation for our entire palm supply chain. We also describe how we are assessing our suppliers and continuing to support them to become more responsible. We continue to report on our other ongoing initiatives, such as forest conservation, consultative community programs like participatory mapping, amongst others. In the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, and as we continue to navigate a changed world, we believe that the theme of staying the course is also very apt in addressing any concerns our stakeholders may have about whether we will be changing or reducing our commitments. We are not. In fact, we recognize that it is only by paying attention to ESG matters that a company can continue to remain resilient in the face of shocks like the global pandemic. This is also in our minds as we move into the decisive decade to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals set out by the United Nations. I will now hand over to my colleague Shuling, who will take you through the highlights of our 2019 Sustainability Report.
Thanks, Pak. Before we proceed to look at the different sections covered in the SR 2019, I would just like to recap some facts about palm oil. It remains the most productive vegetable oil crop in the world, as can be seen in this infographic, which comes from the IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature. It requires less land than all other major oil crops to produce 1 ton of oil. In fact, these figures have actually improved slightly from last year, showing how efficient oil palm continues to be in terms of producing food and fuel. Given the projected rise in global population and demand for vegetable oil, palm oil remains one of the most viable and sustainable vegetable oil crops in the world. Not only is it versatile and productive, palm oil has also contributed to a great improvement in the living standards of millions of farmers and their families in tropical developing countries like Indonesia and Malaysia, lifting a substantial portion of society out of poverty. A farmer growing palm oil can earn at least 7 times more than if he were just growing subsistence crops. Palm oil revenues also continue to outstrip revenues from other cash crops including rubber and cocoa. Last year, Indonesia generated $19 billion in palm oil exports, and the sector continues to provide employment for an estimated 16 million people, both directly and indirectly. This is why, as the UN calls for us to focus on sustainable, inclusive economic growth, we believe that responsibly grown palm oil can help achieve the UN SDGs with its ability to eliminate poverty, provide jobs, and reduce inequalities. Let's take a look now at what GA has achieved in responsible production over the years and how it has stayed the course. At GA, we've been implementing sustainable practices for some time, as we believe that economic growth can go hand in hand with environmental protection. In 1997, we were the first Indonesian palm oil grower to adopt a zero burning policy. We adopted a no development on peat policy in 2010. These two practices together are key to preventing forest fires and haze on our concessions. In 2011, we were the first in the industry to adopt a forest conservation policy, leading the way for the rest of the sector. In that year, GA also joined the RSPO. Our subsidiary SMART had joined earlier in 2005. As part of our holistic approach to responsible palm, we complemented our FCP with policies on social and community engagement and yield improvement. We also worked with stakeholders like Greenpeace and TFT to evolve new standards in forest conservation with the high carbon stock approach. In 2014, as our downstream business started to take off, we extended our policy scope to cover the entire value chain. One of the results of this was the achievement of 100% traceability to the mill in 2015. That same year, we integrated all our policies into one master document called the GA Social and Environmental Policy, or the GSEP. Our latest milestones include the achievement of 100% traceability to the plantation for GA-owned mills in 2017, and a breakthrough in yield improvement through non-GMO clonals. In 2019, we joined an industry initiative to fund and support the development of improved forest surveillance through radar monitoring. We report on our commitments in the GSEP and our most material sustainability issues. The SR 2019 contains a targets table, which you will see right at the beginning of the report. And here you'll be able to see at a glance what progress we are making. We are also keeping track of our contributions towards the UN SDGs. While palm oil production actually touches on nearly all of the SDGs, at GA we are focusing on UN SDG 2, 12, 15, and 17, as we believe this is where we can contribute strategically. On this page in the SR, you'll be able to find links to specific initiatives and projects that we believe are helping to advance these sustainable development goals. Let's now turn to look at what progress was made in 2019. We start off with the area in which the most progress was made, and that is in responsible sourcing and supply chain transformation. This diagram shows the highly complex palm supply chain under GA. As we are a seed to shelf business, our supply and value chain goes all the way back to the plantation at one end and to the consumer at the other. Since our downstream business began to take off, we've been investing in helping our palm suppliers become more responsible producers. As you can see in the infographic, this effort involves engaging with hundreds of Tier 1 suppliers and potentially thousands of Tier 2 suppliers. For the last 6 years, we've been engaged in a massive traceability project. And progress can be seen at the left side of this diagram, which shows our achievement of traceability to the plantation as of 2019. As of end 2019, we had achieved 78% full traceability to the plantation, or TTP. We continue to maintain 100% traceability to the mill. TTP data is reported quarterly on our sustainability dashboard. Given the progress towards TTP as of 2019, we're confident that we are on track to achieve 100% TTP for the entire palm supply chain by end of 2020. However, we also note that the COVID-19 pandemic may affect this timetable. And although we are trying to stay on track by continuing remote assessments and engagement with our suppliers. Just a note, suppliers who do not comply with our traceability requirements will ultimately rule themselves out of our supply chain. Traceability is a cornerstone of our efforts to raise standards amongst our suppliers. Building on traceability efforts, we engage further with our suppliers to help them improve their practices on the ground. One of the most tangible and encouraging results of this massive effort is that we are currently supporting the commitments of our suppliers to conserve 65,000 hectares of forest. We do this through raising their awareness and helping them to formalize their no deforestation and no peat policies. We also share best practices with them and help guide them to strengthen their efforts in forest conservation. Since we started our deep engagement with our suppliers, at least 10 of them have undertaken HCS and HCV, that's high carbon stock and high conservation value assessments, which require a substantial commitment in resources. In tandem with our support of suppliers, we assess them annually. All new suppliers are now assessed based on ESG criteria as per the GSEP, in addition to commercial considerations. For existing suppliers, we assess all supplier mills, including GAR mills, through desktop and spatial analysis. This allows us to rank the suppliers according to their risk category. We can then prioritize high-risk mills for further engagement, including site visits. Our responsible sourcing department aims to visit at least 20 high-risk suppliers every year. Through deep engagement, we then help the suppliers come up with action plans to address critical issues. Action plans can include elements like strengthening of SOPs, formalization of NDPE policies, and sharing of best practices. Almost 40% of those engaged with time-bound plans showed improvement last year. We also carry out site visits to suppliers involved in grievances as part of the grievance handling process. Last year, we visited 90% of suppliers cited in grievances. All cases are documented on our publicly available grievance list, and as of May this year, the NGO Mighty Earth has ranked GAR top amongst palm oil companies for tackling and resolving grievances. Support for suppliers includes organizing workshops based on our analysis of suppliers' needs as well as their feedback. Last year, we organized workshops in traceability, responsible labor practices, and FPIC implementation, amongst other things. In addition, we launched the Satria Sawit program to accelerate TTP achievement among smallholders and agents or middlemen. Dropping a supplier is always the last resort for us. But from time to time, we do exercise this option, especially when a supplier is deemed non-compliant with our policies, especially following repeated outreach attempts. More details can be found on the grievance list. We continued with our support for over 70,000 plasma smallholders in our concessions. This includes giving them access to high-yielding seeds and training them in good agricultural practices. Plasma smallholders are also subject to GSEP requirements. With GAR's help, our plasma smallholders consistently achieve a higher yield than the Indonesian national average. Our supplier inclusiveness program also includes support to independent smallholders. These smallholders generally have small plots and low productivity, which can hamper their ability to earn a decent livelihood and adopt more sustainable practices. To address this, we support independent smallholders through the Independent Farmers Replanting Program, which encourages them to replant with better, high-yielding seed through providing financing which helps them support their livelihoods in the 3 to 4 years it takes for the oil palms to mature. The idea behind this is to increase the productivity of the farmers on their existing small holdings, raising their income and potentially reducing the need to open more land for agriculture. On the environmental front, we continue to maintain our conservation areas of 72,000 hectares, or the equivalent of Singapore's land area across our concessions. In addition to the 65,000 hectares of conservation commitments by our suppliers and the agreements to conserve over 7,000 hectares of forest by local communities through joint conservation planning, we are overseeing directly and indirectly the conservation of over 144,000 hectares. We are also supporting 40 alternative livelihood projects as part of our joint conservation partnerships with local communities. These projects provide alternative sources of income and food security, boosting the resilience of local farming communities. This resilience building has become even more important in light of the COVID-19 pandemic and its disruption of supply chains and livelihoods. The projects currently include planting cash and food crops and animal husbandry. These projects also aim to convince rural communities that they do not need to open more forest areas in order to support themselves. In 2019, we also joined an industry initiative to fund the development of improved forest surveillance using radar. This will enable deforestation incidents to be detected faster and allow the industry to take countermeasures on the ground if it involves their supply chain. Delinking deforestation from production is something we have been tackling for many years, and as a result, the CDP has given GAR a score of A- in the forest section in the last 2 years. Aside from forest conservation, we continued with our biodiversity conservation efforts. Since 2011, we have released 116 orangutans back into the wild in partnership with Orangutan Foundation International. We are aiming to release 160 orangutans in total by 2021. We continued to physically rehabilitate the peat ecosystem in West Kalimantan and have completed the rehabilitation of 2,700 hectares of riparian zones. We will continue to revegetate these riparian zones. Drier weather conditions led to a challenging fire season in 2019. However, due to our increased vigilance and improved fire mitigation measures, 99.5% of GAR area was not affected by fires. In light of analysis by Global Forest Watch, which shows that most fires were outside palm oil areas, we continue to invest in and support our long-term fire prevention program with local communities called Desa Makmur Peduli Api. On GHG emissions reduction, we continued to carry out methane capture at 7 of our mills. We also maintained 100% recycling and reuse of organic CPO production waste as fuel and fertilizer, and continued to reduce pesticide use through the practice of integrated pest management. Meanwhile, we continued with our yield improvement efforts. As of end 2019, we had produced about 2.5 million clones of ECA 1 and ECA 2, which can potentially produce over 10 tons per hectare per year of CPO. This is about 3 times the current national average. The clonal seed stock will be used for replanting in our estates. The palm oil industry is a powerful job generator. GAR created over 171,000 jobs, including over 70,000 jobs for plasma smallholders in 2019. In line with our commitment on workers' wages, GAR complied with the minimum wage levels set by different provinces where it operates. We continue to emphasize OHS measures in our operations in our aim to reduce fatalities and workplace accidents. Turning to community relations, we continue to roll out participatory mapping covering 93 villages as at end 2019. Participatory mapping is part of our efforts to ensure that free, prior, and informed consent is properly implemented on the ground. PM formalizes maps of villages following consultation with all relevant stakeholders. The mapping indicates areas for food security and conservation, amongst other things, and gives further clarity on land tenure, potentially reducing land tenure conflicts. We have completed mapping in 86% of our target villages. However, due to COVID-19, the timetable for mapping consultations this year may be affected. All our estates have undergone environmental and social impact assessments prior to development. Across our concessions, we also help provide and maintain key infrastructure for local communities. In these next few slides, you can see the many community programs that we continue to carry out annually. There is a particular focus on education, including supporting schools and providing scholarships. We also focus on health programs, especially for mothers and children. Other programs include providing wash or water, sanitation, and hygiene services through projects such as the Safe Water Garden, which aims to process wastewater from households to use as fertilizer for gardens. In addition, our employees took part in blood donation drives, and aid was distributed to victims of natural disaster. Finally, I would just like to add a few words on how GAR is dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. Employee and community safety is a top priority for us. At the workplace, we are following all government guidelines and regulations wherever we operate. As these are constantly evolving, please look at our website for the latest updates. We're also working to provide our employees and the local community with personal protective equipment, such as masks, and we've launched a mask-making project aimed at producing 30,000 masks. As mentioned earlier in the presentation, we're also continuing to support our alternative livelihood projects with the communities, which helps them stay resilient in the long term and through crises like these. Again, please visit our website for the latest updates. This concludes my presentation on the highlights of the SR 2019. If you have any questions, please type them into the chat box. You can also email questions directly to my email address. I've also unmuted the participants, so if anyone would like to unmute themselves and ask a question, please feel free.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
Richard,
Hello.
right?
Hi.
Yes.
Hi. Yes, I, Richard Pichocki of Rabobank. Thank you for this very
Sorry, Richard, lost you for a moment.
Ah.
Can you just
okay.
repeat?
Yeah. Are you hearing me now?
Yes.
Do you hear me? Okay. Yeah. Thank you for this very impressive presentation and the results that you have achieved in the last few years. I was wondering, what are the I would say the most main targets or for the coming years for GAR? What are the things that you think are most important to work on?
Okay. Pak Muki, would you like to take that question?
Yes, thank you for the questions. We are continuing to achieve our target of 100% traceability to the plantation. As of today, I think we are already 85%. We are aware that because of limitations to have meetings on the ground, physical meetings on the ground, our surveyors may not be able to collect data for a 100% target. So we will continue doing this until next year. Once we have the 100% traceability to the plantations with the data, then we will start using the applications that enable our buyers to do their own traceability of the products that they are buying. That will probably take a year or two to be free from glitches. The goal is to have our buyers feel confident that the products they are buying from us are coming from plantations, third party or our own, that are sustainably managed. Hello? Am I
Yes,
still
hi.
on?
Thank you very much. Yes, I was unmuted. Okay, so 100% traceability to the plantations, so that you can, I would say, present to your buyers that all the palm oil that you have sourced from different plantations are 100% sustainable produced. That's the
Yes.
aim. And if you talk about the carbon intensity, to reduce the CO2 emissions of the sites, the mills, is that also an important topic for you in the coming years? Also in the scope, in the light of the Paris Agreement?
I think you may want to buy our low GHG products, and they are available, and we are selling about 500,000 tons of that products to customers who are willing to also share the burden of delivering such products. We will probably also continue with the refinement of methodology in our good agriculture practices, such as changing our fertilizers to the types that will have less greenhouse gases emission. Other than that, I think our emission is relatively small. The biggest emission, as you're probably aware of, is coming from new plantation development. It's where forest is converted to plantation. Since 2014, GAR has not expanded our plantations into new areas.
Okay, since 2014. Yeah, and I was also thinking about maybe the opposite. If you in the last few, I would say, month, we have also discussions about how you can capture the carbon into trees or into the soil, so that you, if you improve the soil of for example, the plantation, or if you can capture the carbon into trees, then you can, that is also carbon capturing. Maybe you can also calculate that into carbon credits that you can sell to companies who must offset their CO2 emissions. These kind of, I would say, innovative developments. Is that something that you also look at? Carbon capturing and carbon sequestration, also to improve the soil fertility?
Now, carbon sequestration is economically challenging, and the biggest volume of CCS, carbon capture and storage, is if you can pump in your greenhouse gases into the deep layers of rock. But if you talking about calculations of absorption on trees, that is the field that is a bit controversial. We know about the studies. We are watching the debates, and I think the environmental NGOs are still against the idea. With the studies that some of the researchers have made on how palm oil plantations is actually close to neutral plantation. It's not really neutral because we still use fertilizers, but because our trees it's lasted for 25 years, the storage of carbon in our palm trees is actually not a small amount. But this is you probably also aware that this is not an acceptable science yet.
Ponki, perhaps if I may add to your comments there. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Anita Neville from GAR in Singapore. There is also the matter of how national governments and the Indonesian national government, the approach that they're taking in terms of meeting their own commitments under the Paris Agreement, which has implications for plantation companies in terms of the way that they can also calculate or use or sell on or value any carbon capture or carbon storage that may be held within our own resources. So this is an area of active exploration by the company at the moment, and will have implications for how we could value any sort of carbon storage ability for our total estate coverage. I think it's just worth noting that there is that national framework that we would need to sit within as well.
Okay. Thank you. Very clear. Thank you very much.
Is there any other question?
Yes, I believe there's one from Mr. Kamal. Yes, you can unmute. Yes.
Yep. My name is Kamal Seth. I'm the India representative for the RSPO, and my question is more on the market-related side. If you could comment on what are the biggest challenges you face in reaching your own 100% certified sustainable palm oil commitments, given that some of the largest buyers we see in India for palm oil, they're not asking for certified sustainable palm oil. They happen to be RSPO members. In some cases, they don't happen to be RSPO members. So is that a challenge that you face, and what is GAR doing about it already over the years and in the near future? Thank you.
Anita?
Thank you, Pat, and thanks, Kamal, and thanks for joining us this afternoon. It's nice to hear your voice. It's been a while since we've had the opportunity to see each other in person. India is a really important market for the palm oil sector, and it's not traditionally or currently necessarily a big sustainability marketplace. It's still very price sensitive, and obviously there are regional, as you know well, there are regional variations and interests in terms of oil types. That said, we see it as really important to be engaging with not just Indian buyers, but buyers globally. We're a globally oriented business, to encourage the uptake of certified sustainable products wherever possible. And in the context of our RSPO membership, we fully support the push for shared responsibility across both the producer and end user or demand side. So our ideal scenario is that anything that that all physical product is and everything that's sold, all volumes sold that are produced as certified are sold as certified. For India specifically, I think there's also an opportunity, and you've done a lot of really important outreach work there, Kamal. I think there's also an opportunity to look at how we as palm oil producers can speak to that country's concerns about palm oil in an effective way, which tend to be around health and nutrition questions and not what are seen as necessarily traditional sustainability questions. We have a lot of work. We have a great R&D food technology team out of Marunda, just outside of Jakarta, in this area of like the nutritional value and opportunities that palm oil presents, that I think we can bring to bear in the conversation in countries like India, and then through that lens, through that discussion, also talk up the importance of supporting sustainably produced palm oil, because the two things do go together quite well. And we're also taking that approach in other significant markets like China. Obviously, with COVID-19, we have been restricted in our ability to go and meet with and do that kind of advocacy and support face-to-face. But what we have been exploring is how we can use other communications channels, social media, webinars like this one, to reach out to key stakeholders in priority markets to continue to promote the importance of sustainably produced palm oil and the value it brings in a healthy, nutritious diet. Hope that covers it.
Yeah, thanks, Anita, for that response. That's helpful. Can I just have a quick follow-up question on that?
Yep.
Sure.
One of the challenges we see in a market like India, and I can say the same for some of the other geographies like Thailand or China as well, is because some of the players, including the RSPO, does not cover the nutritional and health aspect of it. When people get to know or find out that, you know, there is an ingredient of palm in my product, they didn't know before. In many cases, we see that in India. And no one really answers this other question of, you know, the health, the nutrition. RSP obviously doesn't talk about it, and WWF probably doesn't talk about it either. And there is a vacuum we feel in that space. And really appreciate your comment on, you know, that GAR will do something about it. But how do we make this a credible voice that it's healthy and sustainable instead of just talking about sustainable when the consumer out there is really waiting to hear on the other sides of palm and not just the environmental and social sustainability?
Yeah, it's such a great question. Thank you for asking the follow-up. I can give you an example of how we're doing this in China. Sorry that I can't give you an Indian example, but over the last probably 2 years, we've been working with our China team on building relationships with the Chinese Institute for Food Safety and Technology, CIFS, which basically sets the regulations for food products and ingredients that go into the Chinese market, working with them on educating them around the health and nutrition components alongside the sustainability components. So our initial engagement with them was really about explaining palm oil as a crop, dealing with the sustainability questions, the concerns around deforestation, etc. And then we built up through that initial engagement to get a greater understanding of what were they looking for to help them answer the questions that they were dealing with within the Chinese context. And at the end of last year, we were able to bring a delegation of Chinese officials onto plantation to then sort of see what we had been talking about with them in, you know, Beijing and Shanghai, etc., on the ground, and to physically walk the plantation, but also to go to our food technology center in Marunda to see that team and get sort of insights on that very important question of health and nutrition, food quality, food safety, which are really, you know, big ticket items, hot ticket items, if you like, in the Chinese food dialogue. We had only just started that conversation in the Indian context at the end of last year when we were out in Delhi and Mumbai towards the end of last year. So that's very nascent, but what we'd like to do is replicate that experience of working with authorities in China and identify credible voices in the area of health and nutrition that we can partner with that we can then have that conversation together with brand manufacturers, with retailers and other product users, and ultimately use their networks to communicate to consumers about the nutritional benefits or applications of palm oil. So unfortunately, again, COVID-19 has changed the way that we're working. It's also affected some of the timeframes for doing some of this work, but ultimately that's what we'd like to do in markets like India as well. But I think it's all about alliance building, Kamal, as you know well.
Sure, thanks, Anita. I really hope we can bring an India delegation to Indonesia to your labs and centers and plantation for people to see what they're actually consuming, and that it's, you know, healthy environmental wise and for nutrition as well.
I hope so too.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions? Okay. Going once, going twice? All right. So if there are no further questions, let me end this session by saying thank you very much, and thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you very much for your attendance. If you do have questions later or any other feedback, please do not hesitate to contact us. So we look forward to talking with you again soon, and certainly we look forward to your attendance in our next annual SR briefing. Thank you very much.